The United States and Israel have launched a series of attacks against Iran, with US President Donald Trump saying that the goal is to eliminate Iran as a threat to the world. He went on to say that we have launched a large scale military operation in the country and we will eliminate the threat posed by the brutal Iranian regime. The attacks are expected to continue for the next several days, and they are already causing great regional spillover and retaliation claims. There's been a lot of disruption in the entire region for things such as transport and day to day life. Within Israel, schools have been closed as well as public facilities. The military is on high alert, as are regional militaries. In response to these initial attacks, there have been attacks in Kuwait, the UAE, and Qatar, and Bahrain by Iranian aligned actors. These attacks are part of something larger. Right now, we see that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, and tankers there have been stuck. Those tankers include ones from Russia. This will have a spillover effect on Russia and its ability to wage war. Now, at this point, it's important to remember that Russia is heavily dependent still today on Iran for things such as drones and drone parts. But the initial attacks have been carried out are quite significant. The reports say that their attacks have probably killed Ayatollah Khamenei. His residence in Tehran was struck by Israel and the United States. Moreover, it appears that there have been attacks carried out on the leadership of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. These attacks may have already killed the defense minister of Iran, as well as killed the former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. In addition to this, we see that the attacks were carried out on the commander-in-chief of the Iranian army, Amir Hatami, who is reportedly killed. Now, the context for all this is quite important. Keep in mind, the Iranian regime is not recognized by the United States. It came to power in 1979, in which period of time it took over the U.S. embassy in Iran and established itself as the Islamic Republic. But doing so was not necessarily popular everywhere, and because of that and its ongoing support for terrorism globally, including such places as in not only the Middle East, but in the United States, as well as in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, it has always been at odds with its neighbors. But today, it seems that that might have all come to a very dramatic close. The U.S., in the lead up to this, had already deployed over 500 strike aircraft and 200 support aircraft to the region. There's also the USS Gerald Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln, who have been moved to the region. The carrier strike groups are large naval formations that are used to project power from the sea and to support sustained campaigns. But these campaigns at this point are looking like they're become very long term, because what we see is that the US has moved incredible assets for refueling, surveillance, and electronic warfare, but they also have their command and control there. Having all this there in the region at one time will allow the United States to do a coordinated long term campaign and not just a limited raid. The initial reaction from Russia, not surprisingly, is not very positive. In fact, they have said that this is a disaster for international diplomacy. We see at this point that Moscow says it is ready to help seek a peaceful solution and that it wishes to see international law, mutual respect, and a balance of interest. Oddly enough, that's something that Russia does not afford to Ukraine. But this diplomacy first language is not very surprising. Russia understands that it desperately needs Iran. Without that, it's going to be impossible for Russia to continue waging its war against Ukraine. All of these parts are interconnected. My name is Dr. Jason Smart. I'm a Kiev Post special correspondent and a national security advisor. Please subscribe right now and help us reach 275,000 subscribers in less than 9 months. So let's break down what's going on and what this means and the global ramifications that we can expect to see. So first, for the case of Iran itself, this is obviously going to be a game changer. The entire senior leadership seems to have already been killed. And with them gone, it's going to create some sort of change in the country. Now, Iran for months has struggled with significant economic problems, and those problems have become so bad that it now takes several weeks' pay to buy a loaf of bread. But with the attacks today, the total collapse of the Iranian currency is quite evident. But it's not just about that. It's about what this means for the Iranian partners, what this means globally, and how this will affect everything else. For one, this will affect oil prices immediately. There will be a disruption in the price of oil as well as the distribution of oil throughout the region. A short-term oil price spike can lift Russia's cash intake, and it can help it in the short term. But at the same time, the associated war risk insurance, the rerouting, the scrutiny, will actually not help Russia in any way. That'll actually directly affect Russia's ability to monetize. This is going to affect the Russian shadow fleet that we see operating globally. And the Western attention that's going to go to this will take attention off of Moscow. And in fact, Moscow undoubtedly is betting that it can turn some of this tension into a positive for itself. This allows it to turn itself into a deal maker, somebody who can still deal with the lasting parts of the Iranian government that it's still in place. Now, looking for a way to get out of its own very tricky economic situation, Russia's fascinated to find any way that it can somehow change the paradigm. And this would certainly be a paradigm shift because what continues next is going to create volatility. And that's going to create undoubtedly multi day shutdowns in the cash flow for Iran, but not only them, but Russia. But if it plays its cards right, this can become quite profitable in the long term. In reaction to these attacks, some are already trying to take power. It includes Maryam Rajavi. Now, Maryam Rajavi, who is already calling for the provisional government, which she claims to lead since 1993, they're associated with the National Council of Resistance of Iran, and they're calling for the transfer of sovereignty to the people there. What's fascinating about this is that she and the MEC, which she's associated with, are for many years been sanctioned by the United States. But back 2 administrations ago, they were allowed to reopen their doors. They're delisted, but still were operating from Albania. Now that they are able to come out into the open, they are doing their best to try to shore up power for themselves, claiming that their 10-point plan would be one that would forever change the country. That plan calls for a secular state, one that respects international rights, as well as guaranteeing suffrage for all people. This sort of pluralism is something that Iran has not had for years. To have freedom of expression, to have political parties, to have an assembly, but more than this, to allow something that would have gender equality and equal legal rights for women would be a total change for Iran. To have something like a non-nuclear Iran would also change global security. But that is not going to go unchallenged. There are others, such as supporters of the former son of the leader of Iran, the former Shah, who right now resides in the United States. He right now is looking to take over power again and has a large amount of support within the country. When the Shah initially fled back in 1979, he was not universally loved. Obviously, there's a lot of people who were strongly against him. But at this stage, people remember the good old days. They remember what Iran was like before the Islamic Republic came into existence. And there were days when their country was not associated with global terrorism. But all of this coming down at one time is going to undoubtedly change what happens. For Israel, this is a gain of security. Iran had promised for many years that it wished to come to heads with the state, but also for the neighbors, such as Dubai, such as the ones in Saudi Arabia. This is also a positive. Relationships between Iran and the Arab states had never been positive. In fact, they were pretty bad. But now, not having this threat emanating from Tehran is something that's going to change the world. Given the ongoing challenges within Iran, the fact that the people there have a currency which doesn't allow them the ability to eat is something that's probably going to be viewed as a positive for them. Keep in mind, the Iranian people today are suffering greatly. And though these attacks are undoubtedly scary and things that they do not wish to see or experience, they're things that will lead to a better outcome in the eyes of many. I spoke this morning to people in Iran and asked them what they're seeing and what they're hearing. They described to me that the situation right now is quite chaotic. Nobody is quite sure what is going to happen. It was just a few days ago that it seemed that there was a breakout of fighting between groups associated with MEC, which is one of the revolutionary groups, and the Ayatollah's henchmen around his facility. So there's been ongoing instability, ones that are just getting worse and worse, going on now for weeks. Now keep in mind, it was just a few weeks ago that the Iranians were having mass national protests. Those protests had spread across the country and were taking ground. They'd taken over regional offices, including party offices of the ruling group. But now that all seems to have paid off because today the Iranian regime no longer stands. Fascinating enough, though, is that Iran has not responded as many had feared. There had been a fear that Iran would respond by using things such as chemical or even nuclear weapons if they had already developed them without the West having noticed. The U.S. for a long time had said that Iran was on the verge of creating a new nuclear weapon. But at this point, it seems that is not the case. The attacks that are being carried out by Iran regionally are all using conventional weapons, and they have not seemed to have been very successful so far. But in all cases, we can be assured that these changes are things that are going to change what we see in energy prices, what we see in regional security, and they're going to change even the war in Ukraine. In all accounts, these are things that in the short term are going to be destabilizing, but in the long term will probably work out for a better future. Please subscribe now and help us reach 275,000 subscribers. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.